All right, welcome into another edition of Carps Corner. Hey, and hope springs eternal. And get excited. All you can ask for in life is opportunities. And the Buckeyes are granted another opportunity, which is fantastic. And it didn't look like it was going to be that way. It's got a lot of ground to cover here. I know as everyone was kind of in mourning and you went through the whole process of losing to Michigan, not wanting to play in a bowl game, not wanting to get back into it. Had polls out on social media early in the week, 50-50. Do you want to play in a bowl game? No. Yes. By Wednesday, Thursday, it was 75% yes, feeling like you want to play in that. By Friday, it was about 91%. Yeah, if we can get USC to win, or USC to lose, and we can have, TCU lose, and maybe we can find our way in, get some redemption. Get a great redemption story. That'd be fantastic. So you come around and threw out a poll today. Hey, how excited are you about playing against Georgia? You know what? And it was like 94, 95%. And so that is the full arc that you will get of emotions when it comes to Buckeye football. So we'll hit on some of the postseason awards that came in for all Big Ten offense. Came out like Thursday, Friday. And by the time this weekend got going, man, I was so locked in on all the college football stuff. On Friday night, I didn't want to let myself get disappointed. So here's the trick to life. Set expectations low. Work to achieve great things, but don't expect any of it. And so it was awesome watching Ohio State work and grind this week. Guys came back in just like it was another week. Seeing those guys at the facility, shaking everything off. All they're saying, we need a chance. We need a chance for redemption. That's all you want. All you want is a little chance of redemption. But also going in, I try to say, oh gosh, if this happens and that happens. And I've always set this stuff up before in my head. We need a lot of things to happen. You can always talk yourself into a pathway that it ultimately will. But the reality was for this, Utah had already beaten USC once. They had the formula down. There was a 2.5 3-point line. Kansas State had played TCU tough. And, that was another 2.5 3-point line. Doesn't mean both those teams were going to win or either. Maybe neither of them. Any of them. It doesn't matter. Reality is both of them won. And, we'll get to the seeding and everything else here in a little bit. But Friday night, man, it's a tenuous situation. Started watching the game with my wife. We're out getting some dinner. I'm like, all right, at the bar, watching this. Okay, this is close. Bunch of people around. USC's out in front. And then all of a sudden, man, Caleb gets the hamstring hurt. Cam Rising catches on fire. And it was an awesome, awesome deal sitting up with my kids watching that happen. And they're like, Dad, are we in? Are we in? Think so. Can't tell you for certain. I know if TCU loses, we'll probably get in for sure, but it seems like it's going to be the case. I can't imagine us getting jumped by Bama, but who the heck knows? Especially as I watched Nick Saban come on at halftime. Believe it was the Kansas State TCU game, if I'm not mistaken. Halftime of one of the shows, maybe it was the USC game, and really stumped for Bama. And, their two losses, and, it starts bringing in betting lines, essentially, who would be favored in these games, Bama or someone else. Like, my goodness, we're going all the way there now with college football. So we had all that going on, but the reality is Ohio State slid in at number 4, playing Georgia in the Peach Bowl. We'll break this thing down 6 ways from Sunday. Already talked, did a lot of radio today, 4 hours, and man, Chris Plank doing the playoff selection show on Sirius XM 84. So we were talking to all these different coaches, hearing all the sound, former players, John Jansen from Michigan, Aaron Murray from Georgia, guys popping on, talking about this. And so Ohio State, I believe, is about plus 5.5 right now, which sounds about right. Maybe it gets down to 5, maybe it gets down to 4.5. But less than a touchdown underdog. I like that. That's perfect. That's right in the strike zone. A little disrespected, but not a crazy long line because I think people realize how good Ohio State is. Michigan was, I think, opened up at like an 8.5, 9-point favorite at some places. The TCU for the Fiesta Bowl, that got bet down quickly to 6.5, 7. So that's about a touchdown line there. So that's the 2-3 matchup that'll take place, I believe, earlier in the day out in the Fiesta Bowl. Now, here's the reality of this. And people are going to slice it all the way they want. did you want a rematch of Ohio State and Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl? Maybe. I think I would have loved to have seen that. But the committee did stay consistent. They've never matched up the two SEC teams in the semis. They'd always split them. And you'd use any rationalization. Well, we looked at this and we looked at that. They can say, well, 3 versus 4, whatever it is. The reality is, after TCU lost, Ohio State probably should have been 3 and they should have been 4. TCU losing by less than 10 points, I don't know if that would have been enough to bump them out and put Ohio State in. But once Ohio State was already in, and you saw the body of work and everything there, and their losses and wins, and and the reality is, a one-loss undefeated Ohio State was always ranked ahead of an undefeated TCU team. So a one-loss Ohio State team you would think would have been ranked again ahead of a one-loss TCU team, especially when Ohio State's loss was to one of the best teams in the country, the number 2 team, even though it got stretched a little at the end. But they did lead at halftime, and Boo Corrigan talked about that. But the range of emotion going through the week, all those things, and getting that point there where USC win. Are we in? Are we in? Are we in? Yes, we are. Waiting for today to see where it was going to come down. And they didn't do any favors to Georgia. Many people thought Ohio State was the best, if not were the second best team most of the season. And we had Aaron Murray on today, former Georgia quarterback, works for ESPN, works in the media. And I asked him, I'm like, how do you feel about playing Ohio State? I want to hear someone who has a opinion that may be biased opposite of mine. And he's like, we were hoping it'd be TCU. It's like, and Aaron's like, I thought Ohio State was the best or second best team all season long. I didn't want Georgia to have to play them. And so that was the surprising thing to me. You're the 1 seed. They let you pick your location. And honestly, the committee should determine the 4 teams that get in, if you really think about this. And what would be really interesting is if they also let the number 1 seed pick the location of their game of the 2, and then also pick the team they want to play. Now, maybe that comes into matchups a little bit, or if they're in your conference or whatever it is, you played them before, whatever it might be. But that would be a true test of who they view as the, quote, worst or least best team of the Final Four. Because I think everybody's acknowledging that Ohio State, when playing well and executing, has the firepower to go out there and compete with Georgia. Not saying they're going to win. I'm not going to call it here today. I got a lot of tape to watch, and I got to get a real feel for this game that's going to take place, about a month, a little under a month from now. But the reality is, they would have much rather played TCU. Michigan got off by playing TCU. And I hope that they play again. That would be fantastic. That means they'll be playing for a national championship. My wife brought up something interesting, and this is something we'll have to kind of try to figure out. She goes, if Ohio State beats Michigan either in the the semis or the finals, this before it was released, do the players get a pair of gold pants for that game? I don't know. Not really sure how to feel about that. Lost once earlier in the year, but you always got a pair of gold pants for beating Michigan. You could argue if it's for a national championship, I mean, I don't know if there's a bigger Ohio State-Michigan game than you would have had. And we talk about 1 versus 2 and all those classic matchups in the 70s, but I mean, this is literally the last game of the season for all the marbles. So we'll see. Should it get to that point? That's putting the cart in front of the horse. We'll have a whole week should Ohio State beat Georgia to talk about that. But that's just something interesting. A little food for thought right there. Cam Rising, Utah's quarterback. And I know if you're watching this, it's a good chance you'll watch almost all that game. People are wondering where this guy came from. He was committed to Texas for a long time, or committed to OU for a long time, then goes to Texas, then transfers to Utah. I think at some point in there, he was running stunt doubles for Johnny Depp and Captain Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean series, because my man looks absolutely sweet. He's tough. He's rugged. He's gritty. And, man, he led the Utes to that stinking victory and did it in a massive way. It was so impressive. So impressive what Cam Rising was able to do. I'm like, gosh, I mean, I got a Heisman vote this year, and I'm like, I'm watching just off the emotion of this game. Like, I got to pull back a little bit. I'm like, this guy, he looks like the best player in college football to me right now. So, with all of that, unbelievable job by him. And then you have Kyle Whittingham coming up, sitting there beside Urban, who was his former head coach at Utah. And he's like, you can tell Ryan, thank you or you're welcome from me for them getting that done. So, I mean, there's a little sportsmanship, a little gamesmanship, especially since they played each other last year in the Rose Bowl. And that was awesome, man. It was awesome. A Friday night, Cloud9. Saturday, begin wondering, like, well, goodness, could it be? I mean, could they all slide all the way up to 3 and ultimately land at the 4 spot? Which was pretty good as well. TCU, what was interesting, I thought USC losing puts Ohio State in for sure. I addressed this. TCU, I thought, had to probably lose by at least 7, most likely 10 or more points. They were undefeated coming in. USC obviously already had 1 loss. That would have been their second, bumping them. But TCU been playing good football. They've been improving. They talked about how they're a more complete team now. With all of that happening, I'm like, a simple loss, I don't think gets them in. And so they get beat in overtime, for heaven's sake. They were down. It looked like it was going to get stretched. They believe there was a turnover in there, kind of swung it back. The fumbled punt, I think is what it was. And swings it back. And then because of that, you feel TCU gets some momentum, and they tie it up, and Kansas State ultimately wins that thing in overtime. But that's about as close a game, obviously, as you're going to be able to have. Surprised they took it out of Max Duggan's hands in overtime. That didn't make sense to me. But Kansas State gets it done. So Ohio State got all the luck that they needed. All the good things that they needed to happen ultimately happened for them. And because of that, you get second life. And opportunity is really all you can ask for in this world. You have no idea how many opportunities you're going to get, if they're going to be successful, if they're going to work. Sometimes you get an opportunity, you don't even know it's an opportunity. It seems more like work or something that may be a burden. And then ultimately you look back and reflect 6 months, a year, 3 years later. It's like, man, I'm glad I had that opportunity. It didn't seem like one at the time, but it led to a lot of great things. So Ohio State lost to Michigan. A lot of people were beat up about that. And it was a tough loss. But I went back and watched this game. I've analyzed it, man. It was a handful of plays defensively. They get cleaned up and corrected. And Michigan's very similar to Georgia. They've got an athletic, mobile quarterback. They don't really have the great receivers. They've got really good tight ends. That's their running game. That's their passing attack. And they like to line up and pound the football. And they've got a really stinking good defense, especially up front. And so Ohio State, they should be used to this. If there's any weaknesses Georgia has, secondary can get a little soft at times, and there could be some holes there. And then their receivers aren't very good. They're top end guys, like on the outside. They've got great tight ends, and they can run the ball. They just don't have those elite weapons on the edge. So it'll be up to Ryan to kind of figure out how to take that away. Jim Knowles, how to figure out, hey, bottle up this running game, keep Stetson Bennett in the pocket, shut down these really good tight ends, and see if we can make sure the receivers don't hurt us. They have plenty of time to do all that. I think it can be done. I honestly think that this is a better matchup even than when Ohio State had to play Bama in the Sugar Bowl. They're playing in the Peach Bowl. Buckeye fans, buy as many tickets as you can, get down there. It's going to be basically a home game for Georgia. It's Athens, for heaven's sake, is 60 miles away. So it's right there in Atlanta. It's in the heart of Georgia. But I tweeted this out, and we'll throw this up. Start out. But man, last time the Buckeyes came down to Atlanta, this is what happened. My man General Sherman there, obviously burning Atlanta. Sherman's bow ties. His march to the sea, cutting a swath through the South, thus ending the Civil War. There were people that tweeted out, like, too soon. That's insensitive. Like, insensitive to who? It's a Civil War. Reuniting the country, abolishing slavery. Like, what are we talking about? Insensitive. I know that there was a lot of bad things done in the Civil War, but my goodness, it was over 150 years ago. Like, what are we talking about? 1865. And then there's awesome, the little memes coming up. My man, William T. Sherman, arms crossed, Lancaster, Ohio native, by the way. SEC champion, 1864, 1865, like all that funny stuff. And it's jokes, man. It's 150 years ago. It's a rough time in our country's history. War ended the way that it needed to, and it wasn't pretty, but that's the way things are. And so it's a joke. It's funny. Laugh at it. It's been 150 years. Let's move past it a little bit. But I thought it was entertaining. And they're going to need a Herculean performance. The Buckeyes are, with much like the likes of William T. when he had to march through the South to ultimately deliver Savannah to President Lincoln to wrap that thing up. So, man, I'm excited. I'm juiced. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to get down to the game or not. And I would like to go, but it's just emotionally prepared myself not to go to a game this year. And now all of a sudden scheduling and all this stuff happens. And it's like, okay, well, we're back in the mix. It's time to go again. Some stuff I want to throw up here, some postseason awards. First of all, we got, throw this up, CJ Stroud, Offensive Player of the Year. See it. Throw the next one up, Quarterback of the Year. Ohio State, I want to say, going back to Braxton, won a couple of those. JT won a handful of them. Fields won them. CJ's won them. Like, Ohio State has dominated the Offensive Player of the Year and especially the Quarterback of the Year position. So CJ's got a lot of awards, got a lot of honors, accolades. I'm sure he's going to get invited to New York. I don't know if he wins the Heisman or not. I mean, this is my first year as a voter. I'm like, my goodness, nobody wanted to win it in the last 2 weeks of the season. Thought it was Caleb Williams, and he didn't play bad for USC. He had a good, pretty decent game, but they lost, and he wasn't spectacular enough to get it done for him, unfortunately, especially down the stretch. So I don't freaking know what's going to happen with that. But he's got that. We'll throw this up. Then you got Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously Big Ten wide receiver of the year, as it should be, doing a great job with that. And then your first, second, third team honorable mention. First team, throw it up. You got Marv, you got CJ, you got Paris, you got Donovan Jackson. 2 offensive linemen, quarterback and your wide receiver. Pair that up, you had 3 guys, I believe, on defense in the first team. That was really awesome. Great to see. Obviously, I thought Paris would get it. I didn't realize Donovan Jackson was regarded that highly, so good for him. I thought he played pretty well this year, but obviously garnering a lot of respect and a lot of attention. Then you throw it up, and you've got a couple more linemen on the second team here. You got Matt Jones, and you got Dwan Jones, guard and tackle there. So basically now you have both guards, both tackles sitting there. Surprised Luke Whippler. And then you've got Emeka Ibuka, your other receiver, sitting there. So pretty darn impressive with that. And then you've got Whippler on the third team. So all 5 of your offensive linemen are on first, second, or third team. You got Mayan Williams, your running back, 2 receivers, your quarterback, and then Cade Stover, your tight end. Basically everyone on your offense. 4, 3, that's 7, 8. I mean, the only thing you don't have is your third receiver on there. I mean, and Julian Fleming had a pretty darn good year, but you can't give it to everybody. And then you have your honorable mention or special mention. You've got Travion Henderson. So you've got 2 running backs on there and all that. And it's an embarrassment of riches. So hopefully they'll be able to convert that into points and look a lot like they did at the beginning of the year and redevelop that rhythm that they had. And I'm excited after a little bit of a reset in that Michigan game for those guys to kind of lock up and ultimately go in a big way. So the reality is for CJ and all the awards in the world, but he hasn't won a Big Ten title. Hasn't won a national championship. Hasn't beaten Michigan as a starter. He's going to at least get a chance to win a national championship. And it's up to him, I think, as long as Michigan takes care of business, to get a victory against Michigan in what would be the biggest game in Ohio State, Michigan history for a national championship. Nothing else. I know they played him in the past and 1 versus 2 and all those different things. But this is honestly an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, the opportunity for CJ to end his legacy with an exclamation mark, to write and finish, boom, put a stamp on his legacy and his time at Ohio State. That won't just be for numbers in a book and for individual awards, but will be as a leader of a great team and a great unit. To when you come back, there's trophies up here in the woody haze that you look around and you see, and they're associated with the teams that you were on and the leadership that you provided. That will be his challenge. And we'll see if he can get it going. And they can lock in and have a level of grittiness, a level of toughness over the next month as they prepare for this game on New Year's Eve. And I'm not a huge fan of the New Year's Eve games, but it's what it is. You got to take it and you got to deal with it. So that's it for this edition of Carps Corner. Thank you for tuning in. We'll have a lot more stuff coming at you here as more information comes out and start breaking down these games and everything that's going in. We'll get into some of the other Big Ten Bowl matchups and maybe a little betting advice as you go through and some of the different little pools you can have for the bowl games. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. A lot of fun. Should be a good time. It's some great news for the Bucks this weekend. Let's try to celebrate it, enjoy it, and have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.